I just got back from seeing the Lord of the Rings anime movie, War of the Rohirrim. I noticed that this film was getting slammed and jammed by reviewers out there. It's also not exactly popping off in the box office. The word of mouth is a little stinky at the moment, which I was pretty surprised by because, I mean, it's a Lord of the Rings anime. How could you possibly fumble that? It's kind of a wacky, zany idea to combine Lord of the Rings with anime, but I definitely think conceptually it can work. And I'd say for the most part it does in this movie, but it doesn't really shine. The movie is not nearly as dog shitty as a lot of people are saying that it is. It's not a bad film by any means, but it's also not a great one. I'm seeing a lot of people now that have gone out to see it saying, like, it's the best adaptation, this is one of the finest anime movies ever made. That's also exaggerated. I'm thinking this film really is tap dancing on that line between good and okay. That's, for me, where it's living. Really, the big thing is, I feel like the film was too long, yet still felt like it didn't fully deliver the story beats that it wanted to. I'm no scholar when it comes to Tolkien's work, so I don't know the lore that this is based on, but it felt like things moved extremely fast, even though the film was 2 hours and 15 minutes, which is long for an animated feature, an anime animated feature. And I can kind of feel that took its toll in the animation department because a lot of times the film is choppy, especially in the beginning. And I think it's because they needed to spread out this budget, I think it was $30 million, across 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's chunky. There's a lot of meat on those bones. That shit's not boneless either. So that's kind of a tall order. So I think they were cutting corners, especially when it came to like horses. Yeek. So in the beginning of the film, we're introduced to like the big villain that's going to be the catalyst for everything that comes to follow. Like what actually starts this war. His name is Freka. I think it's Freka. I'm already forgetting if it was Freka or Frekhan. I'm not entirely sure, but he gets frecked up and shit goes cattywampus. Anyway, he barges in on the king, Helm Hammerhand, and he's proposing some slimy dealings. And when he's in there and he's talking in front of the king around everyone, he's doing this the entire time he's talking. It's like he's a puppet on strings, like a marionette. And then, oh god. And then when he gets to like the fight, because he's disrespected the king and the king is seeing right through his ruse, in the fight, he's still like gesturing like this. And it's like I was looking at a fucking animatronic out of Chuck E. Cheese. Like I half expected like a Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare to come out with the way that this guy was gyrating and gesturing. He was fucking spamming emotes. And the fight was really nothing special. Like, there's a lot of action in the film, and some of it's pretty good. It has a wide array of, damn, this is pretty hype, all the way to, damn, I've seen stick figures that had better fight scenes. And one of those is the very first one with Helm Hammerhand against Freka. So they get into their little tussle, and Freka gives him a little combination, which Helm brushes off because he's a badass. Helm is a very cool character. Helm Hammerhand, by far the best part of this movie, an absolute standout character. Reminds me of something out of like season 1 of Vinland Saga. And in response, he takes those blows like a fucking man, and he just delivers an absolute clobbering. One single punch socks Freka in the jaw, and it sends him spiraling, barrel rolling through the air, and he dies from the one punch. He actually just one-tapped this man right in front of his son. His son, whom a moment ago was confessing his love to our main character, Hera. Now, I don't know the lore, again, that this is based on, but as I understand it, in the Tolkien lore, she's not really a big character there. But in here, she is our main character, and it just doesn't feel like she had a ton to do. Like, she contributes to the story of it. Like, she gets kidnapped at one point, and then that, of course, leads to Helm getting really upset about it and disregarding her advice and like the advice of somebody else as well, and makes a very rash decision. And the film has a similar theme to something that was present in the Peter Jackson trilogy, which is about the stubbornness of men. And even though Hera is present throughout the film and greatly contributes to the story, it just didn't feel like she had a lot to do. Like, she's not out on the front lines fighting, even though she wants to. Helm says, absolutely no, putting the kibosh on that, that's not happening. She even gets kidnapped at one point, but she doesn't free herself or like outsmart the enemy, she just gets saved by others, and then when she's returned, she is once again just kind of disregarded. So it just kind of feels a little underwhelming that she didn't get to do more. Even when she like observes something at the enemy stronghold, the information she got from that didn't matter to the story because it's information Helm and everybody else had already gotten by the time she had realized it. So it just felt like she didn't get to do a lot until like the very end of the movie. She was more so just watching Helm Hammerhand. It really felt like Helm Hammerhand was supposed to be like the main character in some way, because most of the film is all about him and his overwhelming brute strength. And they show him like just beating the shit out of people, popping their heads off like it's Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and everyone's talking about Helm. And it's all about Helm's strategies. And since he's not listening to Hera, his daughter, a lot of the movie is spent with her having to like kind of just go behind his back to do things to save their people, because he's being way too rash about it. But it just feels underwhelming that she didn't get to do more as the main character until the very end. But overall, I did like the story. Wolf watched his father get clocked by Helm and vows to get revenge by any means necessary, throwing away honor, morality, everything, and just wants to make him suffer. And he wants to sit atop the throne. It's a fun story, and it's delivered pretty well. It's just, there are times the animation is just not great. For a feature film, it does lack sometimes. There's a scene when Wolf and his army are coming down a hill before like a big climactic battle. And when they're coming down that hill, I swear to God, it looked like South Park character movement. They just had like people just moving like this. Like it wasn't smooth sometimes. And again, I think that's just because of the runtime. To save on budget, they had to make some sacrifices. So a scene with them coming down the hill, like that's one of those things that you don't need to have it be like super fluid. Like it's not going to ruin the movie, and it doesn't by any means. But there are quite a few instances of that throughout the film, which is a bit of a shame. Because overall, I do think the animation quality is good. At times, even great. It's just they weren't able to maintain that consistently throughout the whole film, so it does stand out when it drops for something like that. But I don't think it's by any means bad. What I do think is pretty bad though, and something that it seems a lot of people disagree with me on, is that for most of the movie, the voice acting is just really flat. Not for Helm Hammerhand. I actually think he was like, pretty much everything about Helm Hammerhand I thought was amazing in this movie. And also the main bad guy, Wolf, I thought was a pretty interesting villain that was done pretty well. And the voice acting performance overall was good there. But there are some characters that it just feels like it was their first take. They said, fuck it, we'll do it live, and then shipped it. In particular, there's quite a few instances where Hera's lines just, they were not hitting. Especially in the beginning. So, when Wolf confesses his love to Hera, she's responding to it, and this is a pretty big deal. She's responding to it the same way I respond on stream when someone says, Charlie, you're short. Like, just a very monotone, like, oh, okay, I guess is what it is. That's how she is responding to this, saying things like, no, I can't marry you. No, you know I can't. I don't want to be wed. Marriage is not something on my mind. And she kind of says it just like that. Like, there's no real emotion behind it. So when you do have scenes that are supposed to be a little more emotional, I just don't think they landed all that well sometimes. Another one was Targ, Wolf's right-hand man. I really don't even think they told him he was being recorded for some of these. This was probably like just his test reading lines. He doesn't have a ton of lines. Like, he's not the most talkative character, but his lines he does have just feels like he was almost annoyed to be in the booth for it. Like, there are just some times in this film where they definitely want to convey something pretty heavy, but the voice acting performance is just kind of bland and flat, so it betrays it. I do still think overall the story works well, but man, the performance isn't always inspired across the board. Another thing I just have to mention is there are times where a character does something or doesn't do something that just doesn't make sense, and you ask why. So like when Hera gets kidnapped, they put a bag over her head and then throw her over their shoulder and then walk away with her. And then cuts to her being kidnapped in this room and she still has a bag over her head. Her arms were never bound or anything, like her hands weren't tied. When they put the bag over her head and started walking away with her, she could have taken the bag off at any point, but just chose not to. Like, she was even banging on the guy's back. Like, why wouldn't you just take the bag off? And another thing is they introduced, like, that's such a silly, tiny little thing, but that's just an example of sometimes where you're asking, what the fuck? Like, that didn't make sense, that decision, or the lack of decision there. But another thing that I just have to mention is the movie sets up something and then never addresses it. So, like, there's a couple plot holes. Won't get into those because that's spoilery. But there is something they introduce that is never touched on again. I think they forgot it was there. There is a scene where they were talking about how like there's this weird kind of like mist or something that's sweeping through and it's making the animals go all crazy and they're all rabid and now they're like decaying and falling over because they're all rabid and it's all weird with this disease mist that came through. And you never see it. It never comes up in the movie again past that one like brief mention of it. Why even bring it up? What was the point? It looks like it was totally abandoned. I'm pretty sure everyone forgot that was even in the film. Maybe in like a different cut that played some kind of role, but certainly not in this one. Anyway, though, I'll stop yapping about it. Overall, I don't think the film is bad, and it's certainly not nearly as bad as some people are saying that it is. But neither is it nearly as good as others are saying it is. It's got flaws, but it's also got some charm. It's an experience that's at least enjoyable. I don't feel like I wasted 2 hours seeing it. I had a decent time with it. I just think there was a lot more potential. Like, I really do think a Lord of the Rings anime can go ballistic. But this just wasn't really the one to do it. In some of the big moments that I thought were really hype and well done, it did show me, like, this really could be a cool direction for Lord of the Rings to try again down the line. So hopefully they do. And that's really about it. See ya.